My true story. From Washington. At dinner I looked at my granddaughter and asked, is the $1,800 0 cents I send you each month still enough? My daughter's fork froze, mid-air. She just called that girl a freeloader. That girl's a cockroach, and you're feeding it with my inheritance. Lorna spat the words like venom across the dinner table, her wineglass tilting in one hand, her perfectly manicured finger pointed straight at Ava, who was silently reaching for the salad bowl. I stood at the buffet, holding a tray of homemade garlic bread, the scent of butter and rosemary still warm in the air, and at that moment, the bread felt heavier than stone. I turned my head slowly, not toward Lorna, but toward Ava, who froze mid-motion, her shoulders rigid with practiced restraint. Then came the second blow, sharper than the first. $1,800 a month to live in my house? Lorna sneered, eyes still locked on Ava. Are you trying to rob me before you croak? The room fell silent. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to hold its breath. My son, David, shifted in his seat. His fork, halfway to his mouth, hovered mid-air like the tension had wrapped itself around his wrist. He didn't say a word. I walked over to the table and placed the bread down gently, wiping my hands on the towel tucked at my waist. Then, with every eye now turned toward me, I looked at Ava and asked, in the calmest voice I could muster, Sweetheart, is the $1,800 0 cents I send you each month still covering your tuition and rent? Lorna's fork clattered onto her plate. David coughed and looked away. Ava blinked, once, then slowly nodded. Yes, Grandma, it is. I smiled at her. Good. Let me know if that changes. I can adjust. The room stayed frozen. Lorna's jaw clenched. You could practically hear her mind working, trying to reassemble whatever dominance she thought she held. I sat down at the head of the table, the place they usually avoided leaving for me unless there were guests. Tonight it had been a charity gesture, or so they thought. Now it was a throne. Ava quietly resumed her meal, her face unreadable but her hands slightly steadier. David finally muttered, You've been giving her money? I turned to him. Since she turned 18, tuition, books, housing, all of it. But we thought... He stopped himself. You never said anything. No, I said, I didn't. Lorna leaned back in her chair. Unbelievable, she muttered, then louder. So you've been throwing money at some dropout who can't even pay her own way? She's not a dropout, I said. She's on track to finish with honors this spring, double major, and she works part-time. With whose money? Lorna snapped. Yours, and when I die, I interrupted, my money will go exactly where I choose, and right now, I choose her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was weighty enough to land like a blow. Ava's eyes were glassy now, but she didn't let a tear fall. Not in front of them. Lorna stood from the table, pushing her chair back too hard. This is absurd. She's been milking you while living like a queen in some tiny apartment while we cook, clean, and put up with your needs? I haven't asked you for anything, I said quietly. And this is still my house, Lorna. It was, she snapped. David reached for her arm. Lorna? No. She yanked it away. She's manipulating you. Always has. First the bookstore, now this. And this one, she gestured at Ava with disgust, has you wrapped around her finger. Ava finally spoke. Her voice didn't shake. I've never asked Grandma for anything she didn't offer. And I've never taken a dime without thanking her. She's feeding a cockroach, Lorna snarled, and when she's gone, don't expect a damned crumb left. I stood. I think dinner is over. Everyone stood too, out of habit. Lorna stormed out, slamming the sliding glass door on her way to the patio. David followed behind, shoulders hunched. Ava stood still, uncertain. I walked over and placed a hand on her back. You're not a cockroach, I said. You're the only one at this table who's ever looked me in the eye with honesty. She turned to me, then, and hugged me. Not for show, not for pity, just because it was finally safe to. This house used to be mine. I bought it 30 years ago with every dime Harold and I scraped together from our little bookstore, Harbor Reads. A place that smelled like old paper, cinnamon coffee, and second chances. We ran it side by side for 2 decades, tucked into the corner of a sleepy Washington town where regulars left dog-eared books at the counter like offerings. When Harold died, everything changed. Grief is funny. It doesn't knock, it seeps. It rearranges the furniture inside your mind until nothing feels like home, not even home itself. I sold the house shortly after the funeral. I told everyone it was too much space. The truth was, it was too much memory. I moved in with my son David and his wife Lorna. It was supposed to be temporary, 6 months, maybe a year, until I got back on my feet. But time has a way of trickling out, especially when you're old, quiet, and accommodating. The years passed, and I faded. I became the extra fork in the drawer, the shadow in the hallway, the silent audience to conversations I was no longer invited into. My bedroom was in the back corner of the house, the smallest room, the coldest one, furnished with things I didn't choose. They stopped asking what I wanted after the first year. By the second, I'd stopped answering. I cooked sometimes, cleaned often, picked up the mail, folded laundry, left notes reminding them when bills were due. But I wasn't family anymore, not really. I was tolerated. A well-mannered ghost with a pension and too many memories. Lorna made it clear, in subtle and not-so-subtle ways, that I had overstayed my welcome. She changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me. She stopped ordering my brand of tea. She used phrases like, "The kids need more space," and "We're not running a retirement wing." I never raised my voice, never demanded anything, but I watched, and I remembered. Ava. Ava was the only thing that made me stay. She was the daughter of my estranged youngest son, Michael, a boy with too much charm and not enough restraint. Drugs took him from us long before death did. He'd call when he needed money, disappear for months, and reappear with tears that meant little and promises that meant less. I cut him off when Ava was 4. But not her. She was the one good thing he left behind. Her mother couldn't raise her, illness, instability, maybe both, so Ava ended up in foster care, and then, somehow, at age 15, she found me. Showed up at the bookstore one day, holding a crumpled library receipt with my name and phone number scribbled in red ink. "Are you Megan?" she asked. I nodded. "I think I'm your granddaughter." I took her in without hesitation. For 3 years she lived with me, in a small rental, helped me close the store each night, and read more books than any teenager I'd ever met. When she got her scholarship to university, she cried. Not because she didn't want to leave, but because she didn't know if she could do it alone. So I made a promise. I would send her $1,800.00 a month. Quietly. No one would know. She would focus on school, I would handle the rest. It wasn't charity. It was justice. I moved in with David and Lorna shortly after Ava started school. I told them I was downsizing, told them I sold the store and wanted to simplify. They believed me. They didn't know I kept a separate account, didn't know I had investments, didn't know I was far from broke. Because if they did, especially Lorna, they would have found a way to take it. Lorna had a sharp tongue and sharper eyes. She smelled vulnerability like blood. I saw the way she looked at Ava when she thought no one was watching, like a stain on an otherwise clean carpet. That's why I never told her about the money. Why I never let on that Ava was more than some charity case I allowed at family dinners. Because I knew if I gave Lorna power over that truth, she'd use it as a weapon. So I fed Ava quietly, watched her grow, watched her rise, and on the night Lorna called her a cockroach, I realized something. I wasn't just alive, I was still dangerous, not with fists, not with fury, but with memory, and money and truth. And I had waited long enough. It happened on a Saturday. The kitchen was full of noise, wine glasses clinking, heels tapping on tile, the low hum of gossip and fake laughter floating above charcuterie boards. Lorna didn't even make herself. She'd invited her garden club friends over for what she called an intimate little mixer, but it had all the grace of a fundraising gala for people who needed nothing. Ava had just come back from the library. Her hair was wind-blown, backpack slung across one shoulder, and she carried the scent of late autumn in her sweater, damp leaves and cold metal. She smiled when she saw me chopping fruit at the counter. I smiled back. She didn't belong in that crowd, she knew it. But she still said hello, polite as always. Then Lorna's voice rose. It always did when she wanted attention. "Look who finally decided to show her face, the house scholarship." The women giggled. Ava froze, hand still on her bag strap. Lorna took a long sip of wine. "You know," she said, loud enough for the whole kitchen to hear, Some girls earn their way into college. Others lie down for it. Gasps followed, nervous laughter. One of the women muttered, "Lorna, please." But she didn't stop. She gets $1,800 a month to pretend she's struggling. Meanwhile, I'm out here picking up your mother's meds and folding her underwear. I watched Ava's face. It didn't crack, not fully, but something shifted. Her lips tightened, her shoulders squared, and she blinked, slowly, like someone taking a bullet in silence. She said nothing, not one word. She simply nodded, once, then turned away and disappeared up the stairs. No one followed her. No one apologized. I stood in the kitchen, still holding half a pear, the knife still pressed gently against its flesh. Lorna poured herself more wine, smirking like she had won something. That night, after the guests had gone and the music had stopped, and David had slipped away to the garage, pretending none of it had happened, I walked up the stairs. Ava's door was cracked. She was sitting at her desk, pretending to study, but her eyes were wet and her hands were still. I stepped inside and placed the envelope on her desk. She looked up. "Grandma?" I held up a hand. Inside the envelope was the monthly check, but tucked in with it was a folded piece of cream stationery, the kind Harold used to write his customers' thank you notes on. Ava opened it. In my handwriting, only one sentence. "When no one speaks, Grandma still sees." Her breath caught. She stood. Then, without ceremony, without shame, she wrapped her arms around me and held on like she hadn't in years. She didn't cry loud. She didn't speak. But the way she clung to me said everything words couldn't. For the first time since I moved into this house, someone reached for me, not because they needed something, but because they knew I was there. I found the file in Lorna's nightstand. I was looking for batteries. That was my excuse, in case anyone asked. But really, I was following instinct. That quiet itch under your ribs that says, something isn't right. The folder was labeled Conservatorship Prep Drafts. Inside, printed documents with my name at the top, medical forms, power of attorney templates, a checklist titled Next Steps for Legal Control, and one note scribbled in Lorna's handwriting. Start memory loss log. Push for neuroeval. One good psych note equals petition ready. I stood there for a long time, holding that paper. Then I put everything back exactly where I found it. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table while the house went dark around me and made a list of every room where I could hide a recorder without being found. Behind the stack of gardening magazines, inside the flower bin, under the couch. By sunrise, I had 3 audio devices running. By dinner, I had 4. Within a week, I had hours of footage. But it was the conversation on Thursday morning that sealed it. Lorna's voice, clear as crystal, echoing from the laundry room. "She's losing it. The other day she asked me what year it was. I swear. We just need one doctor's note and boom, full control." David's voice followed, hesitant, but not surprised. "You really think we should? She doesn't need all that money. She doesn't even remember half her passwords. She's not going to be around much longer anyway. Might as well make sure it goes to people who actually use it." That people did not include Ava. I transferred the recordings onto a USB drive that night. Then I called Barnes, my old lawyer, the same one who handled the bookstore sale when Harold passed. He picked up on the second ring. "Megan," he said, "you always did call with trouble in your voice." I explained everything. He didn't laugh. He didn't sound surprised. He just said, "Bring me the drive." Ava helped me deliver it. We didn't use a courier. We drove it over in person. Barnes made 3 copies and locked them in 3 separate locations: his office, a private bank vault, and a secure backup server. "They're not going to see this coming," he said, "and they won't know where to hit back." Back at the house, Ava helped me hide the original USB. We placed it inside a plastic bag, tucked it into the bottom of the sugar jar, the same one no one touched because Lorna was off carbs and David used stevia. We stored second copies in places even smarter. One went inside a hollowed-out book in my shelf. One went to Ava's best friend who worked in campus security, and one we mailed to my old friend Ruth at the assisted living center, labeled only, "Hold if needed." "I don't want you to be scared," Ava told me. "I'm not scared," I said. "I'm remembering." She smiled at that, Because when memory is all they think you've lost, it becomes your greatest weapon. It started like a normal morning. David said he'd scheduled a doctor's visit. Just a checkup, he said, for blood pressure, memory, general stuff. I nodded, smiled even. Lorna handed me my coat without meeting my eyes. I knew. She thought I didn't. The office wasn't a clinic. It was a private practice in a building that smelled like lemon disinfectant and lies. The receptionist called the doctor by his first name and he called Lolo. They thought they were being subtle. I played my part. I let my eyes wander during the intake. Asked what year it was, twice, called the pen in my hand a toothbrush. I watched the psychiatrist scribble furiously in his little notebook. Lorna beamed with the glow of a predator sensing final victory. When he asked me to draw a clock, I drew a spiral. Just how I feel most days, I said. They ate it up. After the appointment, I was quiet, submissive. Just a tired old woman, grateful to be driven home. They thought I was unraveling, finally, legally. I smiled the whole way back. Because while I was buying time, Ava was finishing what we started. The moment I was out of the house, she walked into Barnes's office with a folder of evidence. Inside, time-stamped recordings of Lorna's conversations about getting control, her own forged signatures, financial transfers she made under my name, and, most damning, her plan to declare me mentally unfit using a known associate. The packet also included a notarized will, updated 2 months ago, property deeds showing I never gifted the house, but rather leased it under conditional occupancy. A sworn affidavit from a financial advisor detailing unusual activity from an account Lorna illegally accessed. While I was acting confused, Ava was giving the sheriff's office and county probate court enough proof to initiate a full investigation. That afternoon, Barnes triggered the contingency clause in the house lease agreement, the one that stated, if any party attempts to alter the mental health status of the lessor without medical merit, the agreement is nullified and the property reverts to sole control of the lessor. Which meant, they no longer lived in my house, they just did not know it yet. When I returned home, Lorna greeted me with false sweetness. Everything's going okay, Megan? I blinked. What's my name again? She grinned. 2 hours later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on the door, with a notice. Lorna read it 3 times before her voice cracked. Evicted? I just sat in my chair, sipped my tea, and said, You should have checked the lease, dear. I may be old, but I do my homework. I called for a family meeting on a Sunday. David looked nervous. Lorna smirked, like she was walking into a comedy show where she was the headliner. Ava sat beside me, calm but alert, her hand resting lightly on the large envelope she'd brought with her. We met in the dining room. Same table where Lorna once called Ava a cockroach. Same place where my silence was taken for submission. Not today. Lorna leaned back in her chair. So, she said, swirling her wine, have we come to our senses, finally ready to hand things over, sign what needs signing, and rest easy? I didn't respond. I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of papers, neatly clipped, tabbed, and printed on thick white stock. I slid them across the table. David reached first, but Lorna snatched them from his hands. What is this? She said. Transaction records, I answered, from my bank account. Dates, amounts, authorizations, all the withdrawals you made without my consent? She laughed, too loud. Are you seriously trying to accuse me of fraud, Megan? You're not well. You're confused. That was when Barnes stepped into the room. Good afternoon, he said. Ms. Lorna, Mr. David. Lorna's smile cracked. And who invited you? She hissed. I did, I said, and so did the sheriff's office. Right on cue, the deputy walked in, hat off, badge gleaming, clipboard in hand. Lorna stood. This is ridiculous. You can't just ambush people in their own— It's not your house, I interrupted. Calm, clear, it never was. Ava placed the USB on the table with a soft tap. I believe this holds your voice, she said to Lorna, planning to declare a woman mentally incompetent and describing exactly how you'd forge control of her estate. Lorna's face drained. Barnes opened a laptop and played the recording, Lorna's own voice echoing through the room. She's losing it. One psych note and we're in. Then we shift everything. House, pension, all of it. It's not like she'll even notice. David looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. I may be old, I said, folding my hands, but I'm not dead. and I'm definitely not deaf. Lorna's hands shook. She turned on David. You said she wouldn't fight back. You said she was fading. I never said that, he muttered. You stood by while I did everything. Still, he would not look at me. Lorna's voice broke into a high, raw screech. I did this for us. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the final item, a small brass key. I set it on the table between them. You have 48 hours to leave my house, I said. Your names have been removed from every document. The will, the trust, the deed, there's nothing left for you here. Lorna collapsed back into the chair, sobbing now, no longer in control. No one moved to comfort her. No one offered a hand. Because when a person builds their life on cruelty, the fall is theirs alone. I knew Lorna wouldn't go quietly. After being forced out of the house, with her accounts frozen, her reputation shattered, and her husband halfway into silence, she did what people like her always do, lash out. First came the email. Subject line, you think this is over? Message, you think you've won, old witch? Watch your back. I'm not done, not by a long shot. We forwarded it to the sheriff, of course. Barnes sent it to the district attorney, but Lorna had always been clever about crossing the line without leaving fingerprints. Until she wasn't. It was a rainy Thursday evening. Ava and I had just locked up the bookstore. Our little shop, Quiet Justice, had become a town favorite. We walked the familiar route home, umbrellas up, boots splashing through puddles, our breaths fogging in the chill. We were crossing Elm Street when the headlights came. Fast, too fast, no brake lights, no hesitation. Just a black SUV barreling toward us with the fury of someone who'd already decided they had nothing left to lose. I didn't think so. I grabbed Ava by the arm and pulled hard, both of us diving toward the sidewalk. The tires screeched, hydroplaned, and in a blink, the SUV slammed into a telephone pole, tipped onto its side, and crumpled against the asphalt. The horn screamed. So did Ava. I stood up, legs shaking, heart hammering like thunder in my ears. People ran toward us. Someone called 911. I walked, limped, to the overturned car, and there she was. Lorna. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't there. Blood on her temple, hands slack against the wheel, airbags deployed, a faint trail of smoke curling from the engine. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Ava clung to my coat, shivering. The doctors later told us she survived. Barely. Trauma to the skull, fractured spine, severe brain damage. The diagnosis was clinical, detached. She will never walk, talk, or recognize anyone again. A sentence more final than death. Ava didn't speak for the rest of the night. She just sat beside me in the living room, curled up in a blanket, her eyes distant. The next morning, David showed up at the hospital. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't ask what happened. He just stared at his wife, the shell of the woman he'd allowed to destroy so much, then turned to me. I don't deserve to call you Mom, he said. I let her poison everything. I said nothing. He looked down once more at Lorna, then back at me. His face was hollow. I'm leaving, he whispered. Don't try to find me. Don't leave a forwarding address. It's better that way. And then he was gone. Just like that. No goodbye to Ava. No apology worth keeping. Only silence, the kind that comes after a storm tears through a place and leaves nothing standing. But Ava and I were still standing, together. A year passed. The bookstore, Quiet Justice, blossomed into more than just a shop. It became a refuge, a place where silence was honored and stories found their voice. Locals came in for paperbacks and left with something heavier off their shoulders. Some cried over coffee. Others left notes tucked in the back covers of mystery novels, confessions, apologies, beginnings. We kept a wooden box on the front table, labeled, Say What No One Let You Say. Every Friday, Ava and I would open it. Some messages were a single sentence. He never said sorry. I wanted to leave, but I stayed. She wasn't lying. I just couldn't help her. We didn't respond. We didn't need to. The very act of writing was its own kind of justice. Ava ran the front. I managed the tea corner, and together, we rebuilt a world that had once tried to unmake us. She graduated with honors that spring. Barnes attended the ceremony, beaming like a proud uncle in a suit he clearly only wore for court and weddings. At the reception, he pulled me aside and said, That girl's going to change lives. She already has, I replied, watching her laugh with classmates, a lemonade in one hand, a highlighter still peeking out of her coat pocket. Ava didn't go off to a big city firm. She didn't chase skyscrapers or corner offices. She stayed. She joined Barnes's practice as a junior associate, specializing in elder advocacy and guardianship fraud, the exact place she once feared her life would be taken. Her first case came 3 months in. A grandmother denied custody of her grandson because the child's father claimed she was too senile to care for him. Ava read the file 3 times, visited the woman twice, then walked into court and dismantled the lie like it was made of paper. The judge ruled in favor of the grandmother. "She's a firebrand," Barnes said after the hearing. "Reminds me of someone." At home, life became quiet. Not empty, but full in a softer way. We took morning walks. Ava would point out the same trees, same cracks in the sidewalk, as if naming them made them new again. I made cinnamon scones every Sunday. She never told me when I forgot the sugar. She just smiled and asked for more butter. We watched old movies. She knitted crooked scarves. I started writing again, not a memoir, just memories on scraps of paper I folded into cookbooks. Stillness found us. But it never came with silence, and in that peace, we made space for others. I began hosting circles at the bookstore. Not therapy, not church, just chairs, tea, and women, most of them older, some younger, all of them carrying the weight of having been talked over for far too long. We talked about grief, about divorce, about being forgotten in houses they built. Some cried, some just sat. One woman brought her wedding ring every week and dropped it into her tea, as if steeping it in truth might finally dissolve the lie it came with. I told them, being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're watching, and remembering, and waiting for your turn to speak with purpose. And they did. For the first time, some of them did. One rainy afternoon, Ava came home with a small wooden box. She placed it gently on the table, her hands calm, her eyes steadier than I'd ever seen them. "It came from the hospital," she said, "from Lorna's legal rep." Inside was a single folded letter on thick paper. No call, no explanation, just a formality. Lorna had been transferred to a long-term care facility upstate. Her condition was irreversible. She no longer responded to speech, no longer recognized faces, no longer passed any tests of memory or awareness. They wanted to know if I had instructions. I folded the letter, slid it back inside the box. "She wanted to end us," I said softly. "Now she doesn't know who she is." We didn't speak of her again. There was no rage left, no victory dance, only the quiet confirmation that cruelty, when left unchecked, eventually consumes its source. David, to my knowledge, never came back, never wrote, and I didn't chase him. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Instead, I turned my energy toward living. A month later, a woman came into the bookstore, maybe 50, maybe older, with wild gray curls and a coat full of lint. She ordered a cup of nettle tea, browsed the true crime shelf, and then stopped in front of the community board. "This place," she said to no one in particular, "feels like my grandmother's kitchen." She asked to take a picture of Ava and me. We didn't pose, didn't smooth our hair or fix our posture. She snapped the photo while Ava was handing me tea, both of us mid-laughter at something we'd already forgotten. That photo hangs on the wall now. I sit in my old armchair, one I bought when Harold and I still believed life would keep surprising us. Ava stands beside me, tea in one hand, the other resting gently on my shoulder. Below it, a brass plaque reads, "The ones who laughed are gone. The ones who listened live." Sometimes customers pause there. They stare. They ask us if we're the people in the picture. We smile and say yes. Some cry. Some nod and say thank you without explaining why. But the most moving moments are the ones where someone walks up, tucks a handwritten note into the edge of the frame, and walks away. No name, no need. Just a small echo of truth finally let out into the air. Ava read one once. It said, "My daughter doesn't call, but I saw the way you looked at yours." And it helped. That's what quiet justice became. Not just a place of peace, but a place where the unsaid became unburdened, where people were heard, not with noise, but with presence. Ava is still fighting. She won her 10th case last week. this time helping a nurse get her father out of a corrupt conservatorship. She came home, dropped her bag on the floor, and just said, "He's free." Then we ate cake with our hands. That night, she tucked a blanket around me and said, "You know, everything I'm doing now, it started the moment you asked me if the money was enough." I looked at her. "It was never about the money," I said. "It was about someone finally asking." She kissed my forehead, and I knew, whatever time I had left, it was enough. I still knit, still bake, still forget where I put my glasses, but I remember the important things. And I listen, because in the end, the world won't remember who shouted loudest. It will remember who listened, and what we did with what we heard. The day Ava got married, I sat in the front row, not because of my age, but because she asked me to. "You're not just my guest of honor," she said. "You're the reason I'm standing here." It was a spring afternoon, warm with that kind of breeze that feels like someone pressing a cool hand to your cheek. The ceremony was held in the garden behind the bookstore, the same place where we used to sit for tea and discuss the price of muffins and the politics of mothers-in-law. Now the trellis was strung with white lights, the chairs were arranged in a circle, and Ava, my Ava, walked barefoot down the center in a pale blue dress that swayed like she was made of water. She had become a woman before my eyes, and not just a woman, a builder, a protector, a flame that could warm or scorch depending on what the world deserved. Her husband Noah was kind, steady, a public school teacher who wore glasses too big for his face and had once asked me, in a whisper, what kind of tea calms nerves before proposing. "I want to do it right," he said. "I want her to feel safe." "Then you already are," I told him. Their vows were simple, no theatrics, no performative poetry, just truths about struggle, healing, and how some people come into your life not to complete you, but to remind you that you were whole all along. "I don't need a perfect future," Ava said that day, "just a safe one, and someone who listens." I cried. Not the quiet tears I'd grown good at hiding, but real ones, the kind that feel like a release. Like final proof that everything I carried, everything I fought for, had landed in the right hands. That night, at the small reception inside Quiet Justice, they played our favorite jazz records. Barnes danced with the widow of a judge. Ruth, my old friend from the care home, brought cookies she called emotional support shortbread. We laughed until our cheeks hurt. Later, as the guests filtered out, Ava pulled me aside. "I want to show you something." She led me upstairs to the attic space above the shop, an area we'd never used much, just a few dusty boxes and some leftover shelves. But she'd transformed it. Fairy lights hung from the beams, a small reading nook sat beneath the window, and in the center, a single desk with 2 chairs, side by side. "I've been offered a partnership," she said. "Full partner with Barnes. But I told him I want to build something of my own, something here." I turned slowly, taking it all in. She'd painted the walls in soft blues and creams, framed some of our old community notes, and on the far shelf sat a glass case with a single item inside, the USB, the one that saved us. "I want this to be the office for the new foundation," she said, "to help people who were silenced, women, seniors, kids like I used to be. We're calling it the Listening Fund." I laughed, then wept. She sat beside me on the bench, resting her head on my shoulder. "I never said thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to," I said. But she looked at me, serious. "No, I do. Because when they laughed at me, when they tried to erase you, you chose to listen. And that's why I have this life now. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like someone's afterthought. I felt like legacy." The next morning, she and Noah left for their honeymoon. Nothing fancy, just a road trip down the coast, stopping in every small-town bookstore they could find. Before she left, she handed me a sealed envelope. "Open it when you miss me," she said with a grin. Of course, I opened it the moment the car left the driveway. Inside was a photo, not from her wedding, but from a year prior. The one the customer took. Me in my favorite chair. Ava handing me tea. Both of us laughing. But this copy had a new caption beneath it, handwritten in Ava's careful cursive. "Because you listened, I lived. Now I listen so others can live too." It hangs now beside the original brass plaque. The shop is quieter these days, but never empty. New people come in, and somehow they know. They always know. They ask about the girl in the photo. I tell them she's my granddaughter. She's off changing the world, I say. But this is where it started. And when they ask what quiet justice means, I smile and answer. It means we remember. It means we wait. And when the time comes, we speak, not to be loud, but to be heard. Thank you for staying with me through the end of this story. They called her a cockroach. They tried to erase me, slowly, silently, like dust swept into the corners of a house they thought they owned. But they forgot something. I may have been quiet, but I was watching, and when the time came, I remembered everything. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or silenced, know this. It's never too late to be heard. Justice doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it comes with a cup of tea and a signed eviction notice. If stories like this speak to your heart, I invite you to stay a while. There are more truths to be told. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where silence ends and wisdom begins.